like to write another one, actually. I've always had this thought that I might go back in 5 or 10 years' time to see what's happened to these people. I'd be interested to find out, you know, where they went, what happened to their relationship, what became of, particularly Margaret, in, you know, in a Chinese society changing as rapidly as China is today.
Well, you are. I mean, I know this from working with you on your books. You know, you're a professional writer, so you work to deadlines and all, but you're a relatively fast writer.
Yeah, I write very quickly.
So it's not impossible that you can keep, you know, two different series going, or you could certainly find time to write that other book while you're working on the French books, and then doubtless something else is going to occur to you. I'm sort of waiting for you to say to me, Aunt Barbara, here's my next idea.
Well, there's always a maelstrom of ideas going around in my head. I keep a file on my computer of ideas, and they're just always there. And you know, every idea has its time and its place, and so yeah.
Well, that's absolutely true. Have you done any short story work?
I haven't. No.
I think you think on a bigger scale, but you know, short story is a really nice way if you get a great idea that's a small idea.
I think actually short story writing is a real skill. I mean, I think it's probably harder to write a good short story than it is to write a novel.
The people I know who do it well say it all depends on the idea. That anyone can write one essentially, but what you have to have is a very focused,
strong,
very strong, extremely focused, and because you only have time to really develop that one plot line in a short story, and ideally there's a kind of a twist in it. You know, Jeffrey Deaver calls his short story collections twisted, and the second one is called More Twisted. And I think you know, someday, even though it's not, you know, the sort of natural landscape or flow that you're used to, that you could have an idea pop in your head that is not worth a novel.
Well, yeah, surely it will happen, yeah.
Yeah, I really think so. Well, since we have just a couple of minutes, tell me where you think these other cases for the book of Roger Raffin, who, Roger Raffin, I have to say, also seems to me a dubious character that could well, you know, you could even have an 8th book. Here I am, the editor, suggesting this. But, well, you know, I could actually see that at the end of all this, Enzo could wind up, you know, investigating Roger. Well,
Roger Raffin was motivated to write the book because, in fact, the 7th case was the murder of the unsolved murder of his own wife. So that has been his motivation to I mean, he was so angry at the police, he was very unhappy at the way the investigation went, and the French police are, I would say, probably about 20 years behind the Americans and the British in terms of the quality of their investigation and their use of science and technology. And so that he was wanting to make this point very much in the book, and so going back over these cases. So yeah, he's in there. He's a character, not always a likable character, but an interesting creature. But I mean, there's so much about French life and society that is interesting to explore. I'd like to do one of the books on one of the remote islands off the coast of Brittany, which are kind of Celtic islands, and it's a bit bleak and it's closed community, and I think that I have no idea what the story might be there yet, but I just know as a setting it offers a lot of potential.
Well, it would, and of course you're living in Cahors, which is the scene of, you know, one of the really interesting elements of French history, a really tragic one, that whole, it was way back in the 12th century, but that whole Albigensian heresy and the Cathars.
Yeah.
And I thought with the interest now in new interpretations of the Bible and, you know, the translation of the new scrolls and, you know, or revisit Mary Magdalene and all the rest of it, the Albigensians would be maybe a very interesting subject to explore. I mean, you can't really have something echoing at us from maybe 11, whenever it was, but I think that whole story still. What was it? The guy that wrote the book said in Montaigu. I'm trying to think. There's a famous French historian that wrote a really magnificent book. It's called The Something or Other of Montaigu. But it is a whole discussion of the Albigensians and the Cathars, who were hunted down and murdered and persecuted by by the Catholic Church. Peter Tremaine, whom you may know is Irish, writes a series about the Celtic Church in Ireland and the sort of clash between the Celtic view of Christianity and the Roman view. And the Roman view won. It's kind of like VHS beat out beta,
yes.
you know. But I find it very interesting. And Macmillan is just bringing out a new book, sort of patterned a little bit after Alexander McCall Smith in the personality of the female judge, and has moved it up to the last days of Henry VII, and just before Ireland is munched, you know, by Henry VIII and Elizabeth. And again, you can still see that they're still trying to fight the Romans in terms of whether the clergy can marry and the role of women and all these other things. So, you know, this is a time today when these issues are coming back up.
Well, still, I mean, all the troubles in Ireland, you know, over the last 30 to 40 years were based upon those religious differences between, you know, Catholics and Protestants, and yeah, I mean, it hasn't gone away.
No, not at all. But I mean, so I would think that just because Enzo's there, you know, one of the books you might, if you don't make the plot evolve around it, you really might want to revisit.
Background, yes.
Yeah, as the background. Well, we've run out of time, drat it. But this has been so much fun. So, au revoir, monsieur, et merci beaucoup.
Merci à toi.
And I certainly thank all of you, too, for joining us on this episode of the Criminal Calendar.